The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold ambition. Judge Harold Mercer had built his reputation on making people feel small. Defendants, lawyers, witnesses, it didn't matter. Power was his oxygen, and the bench was his throne. So when Navy SEAL Alina Vasquez walked into his courtroom that Tuesday morning, still carrying herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had survived things most people couldn't imagine, he saw only an opportunity. Alina had been awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest combat decoration in the United States military, after pulling 3 wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle under direct enemy fire in eastern Syria. She had taken a bullet through her left shoulder doing it, and finished the mission anyway. The medal wasn't just metal, it was the physical proof of the worst and best night of her life. It was the night she lost her closest friend and somehow found the courage to keep moving. She kept it in a worn leather box her mother had given her. She never showed it off. She never needed to. The case before Judge Mercer was a wrongful termination lawsuit. Alina had been dismissed from a private defense contracting firm after she reported financial fraud against the government. She had documents, she had dates, she had everything. Her attorney, a quiet but sharp woman named Diane Cho, had prepared a solid case. The medal was mentioned briefly in opening statements, not as a trophy, but as context, as character, as a window into who Alina Vasquez actually was. That was when Judge Mercer made his move. He leaned forward from the bench, adjusted his glasses, and with a thin, condescending smile, ordered Alina to surrender the medal to the court as a temporary exhibit. It was an unusual request, it was unnecessary. Every attorney in the room knew it. But Mercer had the power, and he exercised it the way small men always do, without mercy and without reason. Alina stood up slowly. She looked at the judge for a long moment, not with anger, but with the calm, steady gaze of someone who had stared at far worse than a man in a robe. She reached into her bag, opened the leather box, and placed the Navy Cross on the clerk's table. The room went completely silent. Something shifted in the air, something no one in that courtroom could fully name. What Mercer didn't know was that Alina had already given something far more valuable than that medal. 3 weeks earlier, she had quietly submitted a detailed, documented complaint to the Federal Judicial Conduct Board, not about this case, but about a pattern of behavior she had spent months carefully investigating: dismissed cases, suspicious rulings, financial records connecting Mercer to the very contracting firm she was suing. The complaint had been filed, verified, and was already being reviewed. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone, not even Diane. The next morning, before court resumed, a federal investigator arrived at the courthouse. By noon, Judge Harold Mercer had been removed from the case. By evening, his name was attached to a formal investigation that would ultimately reveal 12 years of judicial corruption, dismissed whistleblower cases, manipulated verdicts, and payments funneled through shell companies. The story broke overnight. By the following morning, his career was gone, not chipped away slowly but collapsed entirely, like a structure that had always been hollow underneath. Alina's case was reassigned. The new judge reviewed the evidence in less than 2 days and ruled in her favor completely. The contracting firm settled before the week was over. Alina didn't celebrate loudly. She went home, made coffee, and called her mother. But the moment that stayed with everyone who had been in that courtroom, the moment that circulated quietly through legal circles and military communities alike, was not the verdict. It was the image of Alina placing that medal on the table without flinching, without begging, without breaking. She had carried that medal through fire and grief and bureaucratic cruelty, and she had set it down with the same grace with which she had earned it. It was the act of a person who understood that true strength was never about holding on. It was about knowing exactly when to let go, and trusting that what you stood for was bigger than any object, any room, any man with a gavel. Alina Vasquez never needed a courtroom to validate her courage. The courtroom needed her. And in the end, her quiet, methodical, fearless pursuit of what was right didn't just win her case. It cleaned out a rot that had been festering for over a decade, and reminded everyone watching that integrity, when it is real, is completely unstoppable.